A career as an actor. It's something that looks super glamorous and super exciting, but what does life really look like for those pursuing a career in acting who don't make it as a Disney superstar at the age of 14?
In this week's episode, we speak to actor Tara Berwin about her journey in her career, which started at the young age of 11.
We talk about the realities of pursuing a career in acting, what acting work actually pays, and what advice Tara has for any aspiring actors. Tara, welcome to Money Unfiltered.
Thank you.
It's absolutely fabulous to have you here. We've been wanting to have you on the show for a while, and I'm sure a few people watching will recognise you. As we have known each other for a very, very long time.
Since birth.
But I know that you've had a very different, you've taken a very different path with your life and career than a lot of the other people we grew up with have. So for people who don't know you on here, can you give us, I know it's going to be hard, but can you give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what your working life has been like? I would say 10 years, but it's been a lot longer than that for you.
It has been a lot longer, and it feels strange to say so, but all of a sudden, you'll know how it is. You blink and you're 28.
Yeah.
When did that happen? Luckily, I still look younger than I am, which helps in my career.
In fact, one thing I'd love to ask is, when did you start working? When did your career begin?
So I started working when I was 11.
Yeah.
Wow.
My mum signed me up to the acting agency when I was 9, just because she wanted me to have something extracurricular that was outside of school, to just kind of build up my confidence. And believe it or not, I didn't used to be a very confident young lady when I was much younger, but I am now. And yeah, I kind of fell into it, which I think most people find hard to believe based on what I was doing when I was younger. So I started working professionally when I was 11. Wow. And I started off with a show that was called Where the Heart Is, which is no longer on, nothing to do with me. But then I was on like a series of different things. I was a regular on The Royal, I was on Emmerdale, I was on Waterloo Road. And I just had a huge bout of success when I was younger. And I can quite happily say that now comfortably because it's no longer there.
I mean, did you enjoy it? Because it's such a young age, 11, to be starting to work.
It didn't feel like work to me. It's you have to understand that when you're 11 years old, it is playtime. It is like playing pretend with your friends, and I loved it. I had the best time doing it, and along the way I met some incredible people. When I was about 12 years old, I worked on a film with Jim Broadbent and Colin Firth and Juliet Stevenson.
I remember that.
And Carey Mulligan, and like looking back now, it's phenomenal. But I think it almost helped me that because I was a kid and I didn't realise the enormity of what was going on, I was very unfazed, and it made my acting style quite natural as well. And it is actually why in my later years I have avoided, amongst other reasons, going to drama school. Because in my eyes, drama school is fantastic. It does wonders for so many different people. But because it's not the way that I entered the industry, I would then find it, as an overthinker and someone who is quite anxious anyway, to then learn about all these other different styles of the way that I might be able to do things or should be doing things, or that I might be doing things wrong. So I never really went down that road. And all of my peers, yourself included, went to uni from school. A lot of them ended up being a doctor or a lawyer or part of the big four financially. And I was gallivanting in LA and New York and also pursuing a singing career. And it was all very airy-fairy and strange, but it all did seem like this beautiful, magical, rose-tinted glass world.
Yeah.
Until I got that little bit older, and then reality set in, and I was paying taxes while all my friends were still at uni, and I was doing my self-assessment, and it was real life. And then the stress takes over, and it gets quite tough.
So there's talks about the fact that you kind of, after you left school, carried on in pursuing this acting career. Was that something that you remember deciding to do, or was it something that just happened again, like you say, because you had success as a teenager, you were doing well in that? Did you ever think about walking away from acting, or were you always set on, okay, I'm going to continue, I want to be an actor?
I have tried to walk away many a time. Anybody who works in this industry will tell you that if you really truly love it, you could or should want to do a million other things, literally anything else that has more stability, better pay, and it's better for your mental health. The list goes on. But if you love it the way that I do and so many do, it's impossible. It keeps drawing you back in. And we were in a school that was very good for people who were into sports and people who were very academic. Quite honestly, I didn't try in school, aside from the fact that I missed quite a lot of school to go off and film. It was never really something that I was interested in. Looking back, I do regret it, and I wish I'd have taken advantage of it more, because I know that it was something that my parents worked hard to provide for me. So, sorry, Mum and Dad, I'm still acting. But yeah, I wanted to walk away a million times. I remember we had a careers meeting when we were 17 or 18, probably 17, before we all applied to
I have
uni.
no idea, but go on, tell me what was said to you.
I said, I'm going to act and I'm not going to go to uni. And at the time, I feel like even now, I was going to say even now, 5 years on, we've been at school for 10 years.
Yeah, it's been
sweetheart.
10 years.
Let's all get with the program. 10 years later, it is now far more acceptable to not go to university. 10 years ago, it was not.
No.
I was the only person in my entire year of 200 plus students who went to that careers advisor and went, yeah, thanks for the advice. I'm actually not going to go to uni.
Yeah.
Every single one of them told me that I was wrong and I should have a plan B. And it's not to say that they were wrong to say that, but as a 17-year-old, 16-year-old who has been working consistently for the past 5 years doing something that they enjoy that is giving them financial benefits, would you not just push them to do that? So anyway, along the journey, there's been plenty of things that have made me want to turn away from it, including the fact that even now I still feel pressure that people know that I act, and people know that I have been pursuing a singing career as well alongside it. And people ask you how things are going, as they do with anybody, and you feel those societal pressures even more, because if I was doing that well as an actor, you'd know about it.
Yeah.
I would be on every billboard.
Yeah.
So my go-to answer, mainly because I'm nervous, because I don't really know what to say, is like, oh yeah, I'm Angelina Jolie now.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want me to say? So yeah, there's been plenty of times where I wanted to turn away. And my parents have believed in me and supported me along the way, and they've been phenomenal. But there's been many points as well where they've said to me, just get a 9 to 5. Just do this because it'll be easier for you. It'll be better for your mental health. It'll be more stable.
So you mentioned it there a little bit, but acting and the arts generally are known for being very hard industries to be part of, for various different reasons. Mental health, you mentioned. Also, there's, I'm guessing, a lot of pressure to be a certain way and to tick certain boxes. So what has your experience been like, particularly since you left school and through your 20s, of pursuing a career in acting and singing?
Yeah, so I have struggled with, as I'm sure many women our age have, the way that I look. I feel like there's not enough of a warning when you're younger. Maybe it's due to our parents not warning us or whatever it may be, that in your early to mid 20s, your body changes so much. And I was in school, I was a string bean, and I could eat whatever I wanted. I was a little piglet. I remember at school, I would have like a muffin and a hot chocolate in the morning. By break time, they would bring out like meatball subs, and I'd be eating, like, calm down. And then all of a sudden, you start gaining a bit more weight. And as somebody who also did some modeling stuff as well, you're then so mindful of what you're consuming and how you look. And I hate to say it, but as much as you might think acting is just about talent, there are a lot of talented people out there, but there are some people out there as well who wouldn't be where they are if
they
it weren't
didn't
for
look.
their looks.
Yeah.
And that's okay, and that's a fact of life. But that's something that I've had to come to terms with. And I think for a very long time, I took my value from the way that I looked. So then if I gained weight, which did happen and I've fluctuated throughout the years, I then thought that I had less value, be that in social situations or actually in my work. And then if I didn't get work, I was thinking, oh, well, maybe it's because my skin's bad, or because I haven't done my hair properly, or because I've gained weight. And then it all just kind of snowballs to create this really negative effect. But I think same as anything, and when it comes to social stuff as well, when you start accepting yourself and coming to terms with what works for you, it sort of eases out a little bit.
Yeah.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
And can you just give us a little bit of an insight into what does life look like as an actor? Because I think it's one of those things that I have never really been in the art. And you hear stories, like you say, you see a lot of the success stories, and you don't always see what it takes to get there. So what actually is it like pursuing a career as an actor?
The first thing that comes to mind is soul destroying.
Tell us why, because I don't really know this, and I'm really fascinated to know.
And also because soul destroying, but also in contrast with the fact that you said that you love it so much.
Yeah.
So I'm so interested to hear how you kind of balance the two.
It's one of the only things. So my dad, as I'm sure many people of his generation, he's late 60s now, always was confused by the acting, because as far as he was aware, you reap what you sow. So he just thought that I was terrible at it, which maybe I am. But it's one of the only things where you don't get out what you put in. And again, that's not fair, but it's a fact of life. And
In what
it is
sense?
the way
Yeah,
it is.
can you unpack that a bit more?
Yeah, so I have done, if you thought about it like job interviews.
Yeah.
So when everybody came out of uni, I remember everyone coming to me and being like, oh, you're so lucky that you're not doing all these interviews for grad schemes. And some of them, they give you the worst feedback. When you go for an audition, and this is without fail, if you don't get the part, unless you've done an amazing job and they really want to see you again for something else, which is 1 in a million, you don't get feedback and you don't get told if you haven't got it.
It's just
so
a no.
it's just this, it's not even a no. They don't give you a no. So throughout my life, I've had these glimmers of hope, which are huge. It's like having your dream job dangled in front of you and you getting the opportunity to do it, and then not knowing what you did wrong to not get it, or whether you've even not got it or not. It's just this not knowing. The not knowing is what makes it so insecure and what makes it so heart-wrenchingly painful sometimes. I have done auditions and not heard back for 2 weeks, and then told that they actually recast everyone as Mexican, and that's why I didn't get it. There's nothing that I can do about that, but you feel so helpless. Your life is so out of your control. And because it's so last minute as well, if you do an audition or you get an audition and then 2 days later you have to hand that audition in, 2 days after, your life could change. Or you could have to leave your 9-to-5 flexible job, whatever it may be, to go and film something for a month. So when I was younger especially, I didn't really have the opportunity to go for all these amazing jobs that all my peers were going for, not only because I didn't have that further education, but because I couldn't leave the acting long enough to go and do it. But then it was kind of like chicken and egg. You can't get one without the other. So it's so tough to be able to commit to anything, which then makes you feel like your life is so unstable.
There is so much that I would like to delve into further there, but one thing I particularly want to pick up on is this instability. I think that one of the key benefits of, and I am not a fan of corporate life
We know this.
but one of the real benefits that is amazing is, and Ellie was in law previously, and it's essentially a ladder. You're moving up the rungs. You know what to expect. Unless you do something drastically wrong, you know that you're going to earn this much for these few years. It's just a journey and a process. It's predictable. Yours is completely the opposite, so unstable. So financially speaking, presumably, either you need to be in the position where either family or a partner can support you financially, or if you're not in that position, you need to be able to work, which is obviously going to detract from, you know, your energy, your mental, just everything that you're going to be putting into your acting career. Amongst the people that you meet, do you feel you know, like in the industry who are actors, is it generally reserved for more privileged people who have been afforded that family support? Or are there a lot of people who are pursuing a career in acting who are also working alongside it? And if so, is that a sustainable, manageable thing to do?
I personally don't believe it is sustainable, but that's just from my point of view. My parents have supported me financially and mentally along the way, and I'm so, so grateful for that. And if it weren't for them, I don't know how far I would have got. But I also have the fact that I earned quite a lot of money when I was younger. So I had a lot of money that was my own that I could live off of, which, funnily enough, has disappeared now.
Tara Berwin, you should have spoken to your financial advisor.
No, it's so it's always been quite difficult. But then you have the further burden of thinking, well, I don't want to rely on my parents, or I don't want to not be doing anything. There's always just this instability of feeling like you're in between something all the time, which is what's really tough. I personally don't believe that a lot of people who don't have the privileges that I've had would be able to make it. And that's so unfortunate, because there is so much talent out there. And all you have to do is look at things like Top Boy, and they cast so much raw young talent, and they were all from underprivileged backgrounds. I mean, Jesus. And then Michael Ward has just been in a feature film directed by Sam Mendes with Olivia Colman. Wow, these people would not be able to have these opportunities. And I feel very privileged for that. And I can't imagine what their experience must be like. But it's almost... It's one of those, like, the burden of choice. The world is kind of your oyster, especially with your freedom side of things. So you're saying, like, yes, the corporate ladder, and you have to build up whatever. And sometimes I have so much free time on my hands, but I hate it. What am I meant to do? What am I meant to be doing? What should I can't really commit to anything in case of this and in case of that. Nothing is in my realm of control, which makes it so, so tough.
Yeah. And I think identity-wise as well, it's very, if you're... it's very hard to
absolutely
form your identity. You don't have to worry about saying what you do with your days if you're a lawyer or a doctor or a financial,
Exactly. Yeah. And unfortunately, that is how people value themselves, and I feel like it will be for a very, very long time. I don't know if that will ever change or not. If someone says to you, the first thing you do when you meet someone is like, oh, what do you do? So that you have something to talk about, so that you know someone's interests, so that you know. And I'm like, what do you do? I feel like a fraud saying I'm an actor sometimes.
It's interesting though, because that is something that I'm so kind of keen to shift. Like, I talk about this a lot, like that it is not good for any of us that we are attaching so much of our identities to our work, but it is something that we're going to have to undo because it's so normalized. But
I
absolutely, yeah.
Another thing I would love to ask about is, I guess, what success looks like for actors as well, because again, this is something I feel like is really not clear, because you mentioned someone there like Michael Ward, who I'm there nodding along being like, I've followed since Top Boy days, and he has had an incredible rise so far. Very, very talented. But I wonder, from an actor's perspective, at what point do you feel like you are successful? And also, like, when do you start to earn good money, and what does that look like? And
I'll let you know when I know.
Well, hang on a minute, because
Well, okay, so the success, I think a lot of actors have imposter syndrome, because the problem with acting as well is when you're on a job, you get treated like royalty to an embarrassing point where the crew will be like wrapping you in coats and pushing you to the front of the queue to get food so that you're there on time, so that you can sit in the makeup chair. Oh God, it's so embarrassing. It makes me like blush thinking about it. But you then come off that job and your whole identity changes because you're nobody again.
Yeah.
You are sitting in your living room doing whatever you're doing, be that doing flexible work, or which it has to be flexible because so again, no commitment. And you question your whole identity and you question whether you're actually good or not. I genuinely, and this is just my opinion, I think that it's completely subjective.
Yeah.
And I think that the only way that actors can measure their success is based on whether they got the part or whether the money is in their bank.
Is there a type of acting which pays better than another? So
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Adverts. So between the ages of, this is one of my great successes, between the ages of like 16 to 19, I was in Kingsmill adverts, Kingsmill bread, and they did incredibly well. And they paid so much money.
Really?
For like what it ended up being. It would be like 3 days filming for a 30-second advert. And it's just like another world, especially food commercials. There are like 2 food stylists on set where they're like spraying the food with water and tweezering different pieces of lettuce into different areas, and then like all surveying it and looking over it and being like, yeah, I think this is good. And
Wow.
there is a man in another room who is getting loaves of bread, Kingsmill bread, choosing the perfect slices from each of the loaves and repacking them to make them look better.
Oh my goodness.
It's bizarre. But anyway, that aside, yes, commercials pay incredibly well. TV and film are good. TV, probably not as good as film. And then theatre, I've not had any experience with it, but from what my friends have said, is not particularly good. And also there's the payoff in theatre of losing your weekends, losing your evenings, and very unsocial hours.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that for a lot of actors, being in commercials doesn't feel like, I guess, real acting. So
No.
it's a bit of a balance.
It almost seems to me, and tell me if I don't know if I've got this right or not, but it feels to me like the more you get paid, and actually I think this is similar in other industries, is like the things that pay the best versus the things that pay the worst, like theatre. The level of respect, you get more respect for doing, and you get it in other industries
which
as well.
goes back to what you were saying about success, because is it to
How do you measure it?
Is it to do with financial success or success as for you as a performer? But that's very self-indulgent
And I
to
guess
think that way.
I guess it depends on your values as well, because like in any career, it's like, what do you value? Do you value money in the bank? Do you value like providing for yourself? Do you value, being on stage in a theatre and doing the best job you feel that you've done?
Yeah.
I guess it depends what your values are.
And I think that also comes down to your upbringing and even down to like the way you've been educated, what your school taught you, and what your parents taught you, what you were surrounded by, because that also is how you value your success, how you measure your success.
But I really appreciate that you've been open about the fact that you've been privileged and your family have supported you. But I know that you have worked.
Oh yeah, that's not to take away from what I've done.
You have worked, and it's hard, and especially given that you are battling. Yes, it might be hard in a law firm or a bank where you're working long hours. I'm not saying that doesn't come with its own challenges, but you are having to deal with some really significant challenges, all the instability, all the insecurity, the kind of impacts on your mental health, and you have been working as well. What's it been like, when you have been in the working world? How have you found that? Have there been times, you said there had been times when you'd wanted to walk away from acting. Like, how have you found that compared to being an actor? And does it tempt you?
It's hard to say, but yes, I have been privileged, but that isn't to take away from the fact that I have worked extremely hard in my own right. So I wouldn't want anyone to walk away from this thinking that it's just because I've paid my way. I've done mainly gym work. So I would do the 5 a.m. wake up. I would go and teach people, and then you have a block of time free. You go in and train yourself at lunch or whatever it may be, and then you go back in the evenings. I've had times where I've experienced complete burnout.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say that it's just because of work, but also down to the trials and tribulations of growing up and finding yourself and going out on the weekends and drinking too much. And I always found that when I was younger, I had my youth taken away from me which has come back to bite me as I've gotten older, because I didn't have the uni experience. I was working with adults on films and TV shows and whatever it may be, surrounded by crew and people that were older than me, always from the age of 11. And I didn't feel like I could ever not have fun. I still had a good time, but it was monitored and it was a job, and you have to have a level of professionalism. So then I guess during my later years, I then kind of couldn't really find myself, didn't know what I was doing. Like everyone does, you know, you go out too much, you drink too much, you experience your youth, whatever that may be. And then, yeah, it's been hard. And then it comes with its own mental struggles. And I have wanted to walk away and just have a 9-to-5 job, but I don't know whether it's my ego, my love for what I do, or whatever it may be, or these glimmers of hope that come. You know, you get a recall for something that is filming in Bratislava for 4 months in 3 weeks' time, and you're like, and you kind of find yourself in this situation where, you know, when you have so much to do, but you just sit on the sofa and stare into the abyss.
Sadly, I do that most days, to be honest.
That's kind of what it gets to you. Like, where do I even start? Where do I go from here? And you kind of, it's so tentative where you next step onto and what you decide to do next.
I mean, there's so many things that we've talked about in terms of what's gone into your career, and it's been very eye-opening. One thing I'd love to ask is, if now that you have the benefit of hindsight and experience, if you were talking to someone, so you started working at 11, if you were talking to, say, a 10-year-old now who was already in that world or getting into that world or thinking they wanted to pursue it, what sort of advice would you give to them? Do you think it's important? I know I've spoken to a couple of professional footballers before who have said you have to have other things outside of football to rely on, go to school, study. What would be your advice to a kind of 10-year-old who's just starting that journey?
I think it would be definitely to have other things. Mm-hmm. But I think it's the same for anyone. You have to have different components to your life, and you have to be able to fill your own cup. I think for a very long time, I allowed the external approval or disapproval of others to change the way that I felt about myself. And unfortunately, that came from a young age because of what I was doing. And it's nobody's fault. But it's, you know, a child should not have had to go through that for me to then have to go through so many years of trying to understand it and coming out the other side. I would just say to take advantage of my education more, honestly.
Really?
I would have worked a lot harder at school, but I'm certain that I did what I could with what I had at the time.
Yeah.
And I am in a place finally at the ripe old age of 28 of feeling like I am so comfortable in who I am as a person that the rest kind of doesn't matter, and it's all been lessons in getting to where I am and feeling comfortable.
Yeah. I think that the 28-year-olds, us that were at school, that were working really hard, probably because we haven't had the same challenges, because we have had the benefit of having our identities wrapped up in a job position or something. I'm really confident that I can speak for a lot of us when I say I don't think we have achieved that level of no seriously, because I think we haven't had to go through that, so don't underestimate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much. I mean, I feel like we could talk to you for ages.
We'll have to get you back on.
I'd love to.
It's been so great to hear a bit about your journey. So
thank you.
For anyone that does want to find out a bit more about your journey, follow you along, where is the best place?
I suppose I would just say IMDb. I know that sounds really silly, but I have got out of the habit of posting everything on Instagram. I don't think it's good for anybody's mental health. And yeah, follow my career there. If you want to have a look at social stuff, just get in contact with me if you know me personally, and otherwise don't, because that's quite weird.
And YouTube the Kingsmill adverts, because that is worth a watch.
Definitely, for sure. And if I'm doing well, you'll probably know about it.
Yeah.